Welcome, everyone. Tonight, we're diving into some of the most common myths, misconceptions, and misunderstandings surrounding ancient Greece. Many of these ideas have survived for centuries and are still widely believed today. When most people picture ancient Greece, they immediately imagine a Spartan warrior standing proudly on a battlefield, shield raised and ready for combat. Popular movies and books often portray Spartans as unbeatable fighters, men who never retreated, never doubted themselves, and spent every moment preparing for war. While Sparta certainly developed one of the most respected military systems in the ancient world, the reality was far more complex than the legends suggest. Spartan boys entered a rigorous training system at a young age where they learned discipline, endurance, obedience, and survival skills. Life was intentionally difficult because hardship was considered an essential part of building strong soldiers. This demanding education helped create highly skilled warriors and earned Sparta an intimidating reputation throughout Greece. However, over time, admiration gradually transformed into mythology. Effective soldiers became legendary heroes, and military success evolved into stories of complete invincibility. The famous Battle of Thermopylae played a major role in shaping this image. King Leonidas and his warriors courageously defended a narrow mountain pass against the invading Persian forces. Their determination and sacrifice became symbols of bravery that inspired generations. Yet one important fact is often overlooked: the Greeks lost the battle. The Persians eventually broke through and achieved their objective. Thermopylae remains famous not because it was a victory, but because it demonstrated extraordinary courage in the face of overwhelming odds. History has a curious habit of turning heroic defeats into lasting legends, and Thermopylae is perhaps one of the greatest examples ever recorded. Another common misconception about ancient Greece concerns democracy. Athens is often celebrated as the birthplace of democratic government, and while this is true, the reality was far more limited than many people imagine today. Modern democracies generally allow most adult citizens to participate in elections. Ancient Athens, however, restricted political participation to a relatively small portion of the population. Only adult male citizens born to Athenian parents could vote or take part in major political decisions. Women were excluded from the political process. Foreign residents, despite contributing to the city's economy and culture, had no voting rights. Enslaved people were also denied any political voice. As a result, a large percentage of the population had no direct influence over government decisions. Despite these limitations, Athenian democracy was revolutionary for its time. Unlike many neighboring states ruled by kings or aristocratic elites, Athens allowed eligible citizens to debate laws, vote on policies, and participate directly in government affairs. Large assemblies regularly gathered to discuss military campaigns, taxation, public spending, and foreign policy. Citizens could openly express their opinions and influence important decisions that shaped the future of the city. However, democratic politics was often messy. Public debates could become emotional and divisive. Charismatic speakers sometimes persuaded crowds more effectively than the most knowledgeable individuals. Political rivalries frequently influenced decision-making, and popular opinion could change rapidly. One of the most unusual features of Athenian democracy was ostracism. Citizens could vote to exile an individual from the city for 10 years if they believed that person posed a threat to the state. Names were written on pottery fragments, and those receiving enough votes were forced to leave Athens. Although imperfect, this political system introduced ideas that would later influence governments around the world. Concepts such as civic participation, public debate, and political accountability all have roots in the democratic experiments of ancient Athens. The Greeks did not create a democracy that included everyone, but they established principles that would shape political systems for centuries to come. Ancient Greece is also famous for its philosophers, yet modern portrayals often create the impression that these thinkers were universally admired and respected. The truth was far more complicated. Today, figures like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle are regarded as intellectual giants whose ideas helped shape the foundations of Western thought. However, during their own lifetimes, philosophers were not always celebrated. Many were controversial, criticized, and sometimes even feared. Socrates provides the best example. Modern audiences often see him as a wise teacher devoted to truth and reason. Many Athenians, however, viewed him as an irritating troublemaker. He had a habit of questioning people about their beliefs, exposing weaknesses in their arguments, and encouraging them to rethink ideas they had long accepted without question. While some admired this approach, others found it deeply uncomfortable. Socrates challenged politicians, poets, military leaders, and influential citizens. His constant questioning earned him devoted followers, but it also created powerful enemies. Eventually, he was accused of corrupting the youth and disrespecting traditional religious beliefs. The result was one of history's most famous trials. Found guilty by an Athenian jury, Socrates was sentenced to death and forced to drink poison. The man, now celebrated as one of the greatest philosophers in history, was executed by the very society that produced him. Other philosophers faced similar difficulties. Intellectuals who questioned established traditions often attracted suspicion. Some were accused of impiety, while others became targets of political hostility. Even Aristotle eventually left Athens because he feared facing persecution after political circumstances changed. Greek society appreciated ideas, but that did not mean it always welcomed those who challenged accepted beliefs. At the same time, philosophers were frequently mocked in popular culture. Comic playwrights often portrayed them as eccentric individuals disconnected from ordinary life. Philosophers became easy targets for satire, much like public intellectuals can be today. One particularly unusual thinker, Diogenes, embraced this reputation completely. He rejected wealth and social conventions, reportedly living in a large storage jar and openly criticizing powerful individuals. Stories about his behavior became legendary and helped reinforce the image of philosophers as unconventional outsiders. Despite the challenges they faced, Greek philosophers transformed the way people approached questions about ethics, politics, knowledge, and human nature. Their ideas survived long after their critics disappeared, influencing generations across centuries. The lesson is simple. Ancient Greece valued intellectual debate, but it did not always reward those who participated in it. Many philosophers spent their lives challenging society, and society often responded by challenging them right back. Another widespread misconception about ancient Greece involves its art and architecture. When people walk through museums today, they often see rows of white marble statues and assume that this is exactly how the ancient Greeks intended them to appear. For centuries, many believed that Greek artists preferred pure white marble because it represented elegance, beauty, and perfection. This assumption became so influential that entire artistic movements were inspired by it. The reality, however, tells a very different story. Ancient Greek statues were rarely plain white. Most of them were originally painted in vivid colors. Bright reds, deep blues, greens, yellows, and even gold decorations covered many sculptures. Clothing, hair, eyes, armor, and decorative patterns were often highlighted with carefully applied pigments. Over time, exposure to sunlight, rain, wind, and countless centuries of wear gradually erased these colors. What remained was the bare marble underneath, creating the illusion that the statues had always been white. Modern scientific analysis has revealed traces of ancient pigments on numerous sculptures. Advanced imaging techniques have allowed researchers to reconstruct how many of these works originally appeared. The results are often surprising. Rather than looking like the monochrome masterpieces displayed in museums today, many statues were vibrant and colorful. Some modern viewers even find the reconstructed versions almost shocking because they differ so dramatically from the familiar white marble image. The same principle applied to Greek temples. Buildings such as the Parthenon were not simply collections of white stone. Architectural details, sculptures, and decorative elements were frequently painted in bright colors. Ancient cities would have appeared far more colorful than many modern recreations suggest. This misunderstanding highlights an important lesson about history. What survives is not always a perfect reflection of the past. Time removes details, destroys evidence, and changes appearances. Future generations often interpret what remains without realizing what has been lost. Ancient Greece was not a world of endless white marble and muted colors. It was a vibrant civilization filled with color, decoration, and visual expression. The white statues we admire today are not examples of the original artwork. They are simply what remained after more than 2,000 years of fading, weathering, and change. The myth survived, the paint did not. The Olympic Games are among the most famous legacies of ancient Greece, yet many popular beliefs about them are inaccurate. Modern audiences often imagine the ancient Olympics as an event similar to the international competition we know today, a celebration of unity where athletes from different backgrounds came together in the spirit of sportsmanship. The original games were quite different. First held at Olympia, the festival was deeply connected to religion. Athletic competitions formed only one part of a much larger event dedicated to the worship of the gods, particularly Zeus. Competitors, spectators, and officials participated in ceremonies, sacrifices, and religious observances throughout the festival. Winning was also far more important than many modern ideals of participation. Today, athletes are frequently praised simply for competing at the highest level. In ancient Greece, victory was everything. Champions returned home as heroes. They received public recognition, financial rewards, special privileges, and lasting fame. Poets wrote about them, artists created statues in their honor, and entire cities celebrated their achievements. Those who failed to win often received little attention. Another common misconception concerns Greek unity. The Olympics are sometimes portrayed as proof that all Greeks considered themselves part of a single united nation. While they shared language, religion, and cultural traditions, the reality was more complicated. Ancient Greece consisted of independent city-states, each with its own government, interests, and ambitions. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, and many others frequently competed with one another, both politically and militarily. Rivalries could be intense. Alliances shifted constantly, and wars between Greek states were common. Even while participating in the same religious festivals and athletic competitions, these communities often viewed one another as competitors rather than partners. The Olympic Games temporarily reduced conflict through sacred truces that allowed athletes and spectators to travel safely. However, these truces did not erase deeper political tensions. In many ways, the Games reflected the nature of Greek civilization itself. They provided a shared cultural identity while also serving as a stage for competition, prestige, and rivalry. Ancient Greece was not a unified nation in the modern sense. It was a collection of independent communities connected by common traditions but divided by local interest and ambitions. Understanding this distinction helps explain many of the conflicts, achievements, and political developments that shaped Greek history for centuries. The Olympics united the Greeks for a moment, but they did not make them one people under a single state. That distinction is essential for understanding the ancient world. Another myth that has survived into the modern era is the belief that ancient Greece suddenly disappeared after its classical golden age. Popular history often focuses heavily on famous figures such as Pericles, Socrates, and Alexander the Great, creating the impression that Greek civilization reached a peak and then abruptly faded away. History was far more gradual. Greek culture continued to evolve long after the classical period ended. Following the conquests of Alexander the Great, Greek language, ideas, and traditions spread across vast regions stretching from the Mediterranean to parts of Asia. This era, known as the Hellenistic period, witnessed extraordinary developments in science, mathematics, philosophy, literature, and art. Cities became centers of learning, attracting scholars from across the known world. Greek influence later became deeply integrated into the Roman world. The Romans admired Greek culture and adopted many aspects of it, including architecture, literature, education, philosophy, and religion. Wealthy Roman families often hired Greek teachers for their children, while Greek texts became essential components of higher education. Rather than disappearing, Greek civilization transformed and adapted to changing political realities. Even after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Greek language and culture remained influential within the Eastern Roman Empire, often referred to today as the Byzantine Empire. For centuries, Greek traditions continued to shape religion, government, scholarship, and daily life. The story of ancient Greece is therefore not one of sudden collapse. It is a story of continuity, adaptation, and cultural influence that extended far beyond the period most people associate with classical history. Many of the ideas first explored by Greek thinkers continued to inspire later generations. Their contributions survived because they were repeatedly studied, translated, debated, and preserved by countless individuals across different civilizations. Ancient Greece did not simply vanish. In many ways, it continued to live on through the cultures it influenced and the knowledge it passed to future generations. Ancient Greece remains one of the most influential civilizations in human history. Yet many of the stories we hear today are a mixture of fact, legend, and centuries of retelling. The Spartans were formidable warriors, but they were not invincible. Athenian democracy was groundbreaking, but it was far from inclusive. Greek statues were once brightly colored, not pure white. Philosophers changed the world, yet many faced criticism and hostility during their own lifetimes. History is rarely as simple as the myths that survive. The closer we examine the past, the more complex, fascinating, and human it becomes. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson ancient Greece offers us. Its achievements were remarkable not because its people were perfect, but because they struggled with many of the same questions that continue to challenge humanity today. Questions about power, freedom, knowledge, justice, and identity. More than 2,000 years later, those conversations are still ongoing. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the myths and realities of ancient Greece. If you enjoyed this exploration of history, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.